Amendment number 48, printed in Part A of House Report number 118-216, offered by Mr. Luttrell of Texas.
Pursuant to House Rule 723, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Luttrell, and a member of the opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chair, I rise today to offer an amendment to H.R. 4365, which would provide $15 million in funding for plant-based or psychedelic clinical trials authorized in the House version of the FY24 NDAA. Mr. Chair, I can personally attest to the benefits in treating post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy through the use of psychedelic substances. There's a stigma that exists within the body that I believe stems from a lack of education and experience around the clinical use of plant-based or psychedelic medications. I understand that when many of my colleagues hear the word psychedelics, they think of mushrooms and so on. This isn't what we are talking about today. And unfortunately, the stigma has led to the slow or no adoption of medical procedures that may have saved countless lives in our service members, veterans, and first responders. Mr. Chair, it is our duty to explore all options when the lives of our nation's most precious resources, our sons, our daughters, our mothers, our fathers, brothers and sisters, are at stake. I urge the adoption of my amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Minnesota?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to rise in opposition to the gentleman from Texas amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Texas for sharing his journey, and I'm glad you're doing well. I don't oppose the study of many of these drugs, but I'm going to lay out why, in this particular instance, I'm going to oppose this. On this floor, we've had many a debate about whether or not medical marijuana should be used for post-traumatic stress for veterans and do research and all kinds of things I've supported. And time again, we haven't done that, in part because it's a scheduled class 1 drug. The department's concerned about a study involving active service members. They acknowledge, and I'm glad that they do, that the benefits are being pursued by veterans, and the implementation for active duty service members would be much more challenging at this time, because it involves a question around clearances, legal hurdles, and the logistics would just appear to hamper the success of a pilot program or study with active duty. As I said, Schedule 1, I gave the example of marijuana, under the Controlled Substance Acts that mean that they have a high potential for abuse, and there's no currently accepted medical treatment in the United States for this right now. So there's a lack of accepted safety for there's no medical supervision in the way we can move forward. For this reason, the Defense Health Agency does not believe it could even be implemented. I support working with the Department of Veterans Affairs to look at anything we can do to help welcome our service men and women home to find the help that they need. But currently, with the way that this amendment is written, I reluctantly cannot support the gentleman's amendment. I look forward to working with the gentleman in the future for a future time for this. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chair, thank you, and thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. As a veteran, and I hold degrees in psychology and applied cognition and neuroscience. I've spent the better part of a decade studying our service members, our active members, and our veterans and first responders in the space of cognitive disability and decline. And we lose 22 plus a day in the veteran space. We lose members in the active service space as well daily. The active aggressive nature of treatments in spaces like our cognitive decline, like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and other modalities, which I've traveled the country studying. The numbers that we're seeing are not decreasing, they're increasing. And as we transition out of these wars that we fought for so many years, we have to do something more aggressive. And I say clinical studies and clinical trials inside the DoD because it is applicable and it is appropriate. And we have some of the most brilliant researchers on the planet. They can study this and move this effectively so we can treat the men and women that serve our country. These medications have short-term, no long-term residual side effects, short-term, if anything. But the effects are groundbreaking. We are at a precipice, and I hate the fact that the word psychedelic scares everybody. I hate that word myself. And when I try to think of a creative term to title this with, it always circles back to the word psychedelics, and that's unfortunate. It is. But we have to look past that. I've never done a drug in my entire life. Matter of fact, I would tell no one to do this because the aggressiveness of it is so life-changing, but it's effective. And that's why I continue to push forward. And I think it's time and its effectiveness needs to be implemented now. I reserve.
The gentleman has the only time remaining.
I yield back.
The gentleman.